area veterans what Veterans Day means to them, having served in America's armed forces. The result before you now is an impressive panel. One of our panelists had a medical emergency in her family yesterday, and so she is unable to be with us. That would be Colonel Lorelei Copeland. She sends her regards and apologies. But the remaining panelists are here. Our distinguished panelists comprise an alumnus of Donegal High School, the spouse of a Donegal High School teacher, the grandfather of 2 Donegal High School students, one of our Vietnam veteran panelists, Donegal School District residents, 1 retired colonel, and the last known living survivor of the Malmedy Massacre, Harold Billow, who was featured in yesterday's Sunday newspaper in LNP. Together, they represent service to America from the Battle of the Bulge in World War II through the surge of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Moderating this panel discussion is DHS Senior Corey Kendig, who is currently in the process of applying to the United States Air Force Academy upon graduation in June. Thank you, panelists, for your service to our country and your willingness to join us here today. Please join me in giving them a warm Donegal welcome.
Thank you. It is like Mr. Nani said, I am Corey Kendig, and it is my honor to interview these panelists for you on Veterans Day today. My first guest is Mr. Harold Billow. He's a Mountjoy native and a local hometown hero, and was born in Millersburg, Pennsylvania. Harold was 96 years old, and he grew up during the Great Depression, and he quit school after the 9th grade to get a job to help support his family. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, he was drafted into the U.S. Army and reported to Camp Grover, Oklahoma. Harold was assigned to Battery B of the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion. After more training at Camp Polk, Louisiana, and Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Billow was transferred to Camp Shanks, New York, from where he departed for England on the USS Moon. After D-Day, he crossed the English Channel and landed in France in August of 1944. Harold participated in the Battle of the Bulge during the end of World War II, the last-ditch offensive of the Third Reich. On Sunday afternoon, December 7th, 1944, Harold survived one of the worst Nazi war crimes in the military history, the Malmedy Massacre. The massacre occurred just outside of Malmedy, near St. Vith, in Belgium. The Nazis rounded up 130 American GIs and just ambushed and started firing upon the unarmed American prisoners of war as they were stood freezing in the field. The Nazis killed anyone who showed signs of life. The men standing on Harold's left and right were immediately shot, and when all the firing began, Harold dropped into the snow-covered ground and played dead for hours by slowly controlling his breathing until he could get up and make a run for it. In all, 87 Americans lost their lives because of the Malmedy Massacre. Mr. Billow was 21 years old at the time. He was reunited with an American engineering battalion. He vowed that if he survived the war, he would return home to tell the horrible atrocities he witnessed that December day. True to his word, he continues to tell his story of the Malmedy Massacre. Mr. Billow continues to visit Donegal High School to share his story. Every 4th of July, Memorial Day, and Veterans Day, he carefully places 87 American flags in his front yard to pay tribute to the fallen at Malmedy. Now, at the age of 96, Harold Billow has the sole distinction of being the last known survivor of the Malmedy Massacre. Mr. Billow, what does Veterans Day mean to you?
This brings back a lot of memories to me. I appreciate the program that Donegal High School puts on for us. And like I say, this is something I'll never forget. All the memories that went with me already, and I love what I have to do and say. So I'm not a good speaker, so that's all I got to say, and I thank everybody for having this nice program for the veterans.
Nicholas Stauffer was born in Columbia, Pennsylvania, and graduated from Columbia High School in 1963. He was drafted in the U.S. Navy in 1965 during the Vietnam War. Mr. Stauffer served on the USS Manly DD-940. which he was stationed outside of Charleston, South Carolina. During the war, his ship was positioned off the coast of Vietnam to provide gunfire and support to American ground forces. One noteworthy event that happened was when one of the two ships' guns mounts blew up due to excessive firing to provide suppressing fire in support of the American troops on the ground in Vietnam. Nevin was assigned to the number 1 boiler room, which provided the steam that was necessary to power and operate the ship. Nevin Stauffer was a BT-3 in rank, meaning that he was a boiler tender on board the ship. After he was honorably discharged from the Navy, he went to work for the Armstrong Company. Mr. Stauffer and his wife have been married for 49 years and have 3 adult daughters and 8 grandchildren, of which 2 proudly attend Donegal High School. Mr. Stauffer, what does Veterans Day mean to you?
First off, I want to tell everybody that I am humbled and proud to be sitting next door to Harold. What an honor. Veterans Day to me means that I thank everybody who is my fellow veterans for all the service they have given to all the wars that are still living. I feel humbled again because I'm a Vietnam vet. I really feel that sometimes I'm not a Vietnam vet because I'm what they call a blue water sailor. And I was off the coast of Vietnam, not in harm's way like all my fellow veterans who had boots on the ground and came home and survived. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate Donegal High School for what they're doing for the veterans and everybody in Mount Joy, all the flags they have up on Veterans Day, which is fantastic along Main Street and all the other streets. So I want to thank Donegal High School for this wonderful program. Thank you.
Petty Officer Warren Kibble enlisted in the U.S. Navy Reserves in January of 1970. After graduating from Delaware Valley University in May of 1970 with a bachelor's degree in biology, Mr. Kibble served as a communications technician, 3rd class, petty officer until January 1976. Warren served 2 years on active duty at the Naval Security Group Activity Headquarters in Bremerhaven, Germany, from 1971 to 1972. He also spent 3 years in the Naval Reserves. Mr. Kimmel was granted a top-secret crypto clearance in his line of work, which permitted him exclusive access to highly classified intelligence. Warren recently retired from Motorola Solutions after a 40-plus year career in managing the company's federal government markets division. In 2007, he joined the Vietnam Veterans of America, Lancaster Chapter 1008, and served as the chapter delegate and vice president. This past spring, he formally stepped down after a decade of serving as the group's president. During his time with the Vietnam Veterans of America, he was instrumental in helping the group's membership grow from 30 to over 130 individuals. The chapter is very active in the local community and has now reached thousands of students across Lancaster County's public high schools through their educational panels. This year, the group has over 30 presentations scheduled. Some of our DHS students might recognize Mr. Kimmel from the participation on Vietnam Veterans Day panel we have at DHS for the past 2 years. Mr. Kimmel, what does Veterans Day mean to you?
Well, I'm going to start out by doing this. I, Warren Kimmel, do solemnly swear that I will support and dedicate to the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the United States, President of the United States, and orders of any officers above me, according to the regulations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. Every individual man or woman who enters in the military has to swear into that oath when they enter. I had a couple of things here I was going to talk about, but it looks like some other people beat me to it. So here we go. A veteran, whether in active duty, honorable discharge, retired, or reserved, is someone at one point in his life wrote a blank check made payable to the United States of America for amount up to and probably including his life. Veterans living among us today have faced the enemy during World War II, the Korean War, the Cold War, Vietnam War, and the global war on terrorism. Yesterday I talked to my father. I was coming out here. He's like Harold, 95 years old, served from 1943, the China-Burma Indian Campaign, and he reminded me that while he had 3 sons served during the Vietnam War, that we have to remember from whence we came, and we have to remember how this country started. And he said, you know, we have a history with our family, and I started several years ago. We go back to the Revolutionary War. We also were involved in the Civil War. My great-great-grandfather, Jones, was wounded in Antietam, one of the bloodiest battles during the Civil War. I even had my great-great-grandfather on my mother's side, came from Dublin, Ireland in 1865, and like many immigrants back then, ended up in the U.S. Cavalry. He ended up in 1870 at Fort Shenandoah in the Dakota Territory, involved in the Indian Wars. I have 2 grandfathers served in World War I. One was stationed in the U.S. Army here, and then my other grandfather, Harold Owens Reed, joined the Marines, became a Devil Dog, fought in Belleau Woods, was decorated, came back home wounded, and later joined World War II, became a naval officer. And my own father, of course, served during World War II. And as I said earlier, my father had 3 of his sons serve during the Vietnam War. So I'm thankful that I had an opportunity to come back home. Like many of the Vietnam War veterans, we were separated, our nation, in ways not seen since the Civil War. Our Vietnam-era veterans came home to an ungrateful nation, a divided nation, and the citizens could not separate the soldier from the politics. Despite this, those who served overcame the insults. We never gave up on our country. And Vietnam veterans, or leaders in our community, are out there in the public. I'm proud of the Vietnam veterans that I know, that I have grown to know, especially here in Lancaster County. And one of the things all Vietnam veterans do is we welcome home every one of us. We say, welcome home, brother and sister, because this is not the greeting we got when we came home. So I want all of you out there, you see a veteran, thank the veteran for his service. And I want to thank Donegal High School for having us here, all of us veterans, and those who are in attendance today. Thank you.
Colonel Donna Hershey began her 30-year military career in 1985 as an operating room nurse in the 99th Combat Support Hospital, or CSH, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. In 2002, she deployed with the 339th CSH as the chief nurse of the 339th Task Force 44, serving at Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan. The 339th CSH was the first level 3 medical facility in Afghanistan, with the soldiers and officers building it up from the ground. Because of her Afghanistan tour, she was called to Guantanamo Bay in 2010, where she testified as part of the military tribunals. Following her deployment to Afghanistan, she served in various capacities as chief nurse, officer in charge for several medical missions in Central and South America, and assumed interim command of the 339th Combat Support Hospital. From 2007 to 2010, she commanded the 2290th U.S. Army Hospital based in Walter Reed in Washington, D.C. From 2010 to 2013, she commanded the 307th Medical Brigade based in Black Lake, Ohio. Her final assignment was the clinical operations with the 807th Medical Command Deployment Support based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Colonel Hershey retired from the Army in September of 2015. Colonel Hershey is a 1974 graduate of Donegal High School and holds a bachelor's of nursing degree from Milledgeville University, a master's of nursing from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and a master's of strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College in Carlisle. Colonel Hershey has received awards to include the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal, and Army Commendation Medal, the Army Achievement Medal, and the Air Force Achievement Medal. She has been recognized by and is a recipient of the Order of Military Medical Merit. Colonel Hershey retired as the Director of Personal Care and Outpatient Services at Masonic Village in Elizabethtown, where she worked for over 20 years. She is married to Scott Hershey, and who was a 1974 graduate of Donegal High School as well, and they have a daughter, Lauren, and a son, Scott. Colonel Hershey, what does Veterans Day mean to you?
I was in the reserves for 17 years when I got a call that I was being mobilized. And in the purest sense, those 17 years, I was not a veteran. I served, but I was not a veteran. So after I got over the initial shock of, ooh, I'm going somewhere, they won't tell me where just yet, I realized, yes, now I can join the VFW. My dad, I come from a military family as well. My dad was in the Philippines in World War II. He was a combat engineer, and as a PFC earned a Silver Star. I grew up thinking that everybody's dad went to war. I had heard the story of Mr. Billow. I went to school with Mr. Billow's son, and I knew Harold from years ago. So I grew up thinking that, everybody's daddy was in World War II. That was not the case. So after I was mobilized and we went to Afghanistan, and I saw a lot, did a lot, and it was a very rewarding experience. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. But through all those years, all my 30 years total of serving in uniform, I will share with all of you, I got to do things I never would have done otherwise. I got to meet people I never would have met otherwise. And I went to places that I never would have gone, some I never want to see again. I too am very appreciative of what the high school does here to support the veterans and to acknowledge service. It is very meaningful, and too often society tends to forget. And if we forget our lessons of history, we are doomed to repeat them. So again, thank you for inviting me, and yes, so now that I'm a veteran, I can proudly join the VFW. Thank you.
Our last guest today, Sergeant Paul Stokes grew up in Schuylkill Haven, Pennsylvania, and graduated from Schuylkill Haven Area High School in 2002. He served as the Pennsylvania Army National Guard from August 2007 until July 2013. Mr. Stokes completed his basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and was deployed with the PA Army National Guard as part of the Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2009. He was stationed at the National Guard as part of the as Camp Taji in central Iraq, and joined Security Station Tarmaria after its creation and beginning of the surge. With Company C and 111th Infantry 56th Stryker Brigade Combat Team. Sergeant Stokes served as a rifleman, unmanned aerial vehicle or drone operator, company intelligence, support team member, and fire team leader. He was honorably discharged as a Sergeant E5 in 2013 after earning the Army Commendation Medal, Iraq Campaign Medal, Army Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Army Service Ribbon, Armed Forces Reserve Medal, and Combat Infantry Badge. After leaving the military, Mr. Stokes has held various marketing consultant, sales manager, and account manager positions with different wholesale and food distribution companies since 2012. He graduated last May from Elizabethtown College with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Business Administration. Mr. Stokes, what does Veterans Day mean to you?
Well, first let me just say, next time if I do this again, I'll do the phonetic, how to pronounce everything on like this, Iraq, Afghanistan, especially the Vietnam War, some of these places are hard to hard to pronounce. What Veterans Day means to me personally, it's a chance for me to reconnect. It's about camaraderie with my fellow veterans, get to know new people, reconnect with the people that I served with previously. It's also time to reflect on, you know, some people when we come back, they don't last till they pass away. I had 2 friends that I served with that ended up passing away just a couple of years ago, and a few more right before that. So it's a chance to just, you know, think about them and miss them. And it's also, for me, a chance to kind of reaffirm a deep appreciation, like Warren stated earlier, when the Vietnam veterans came home, they were treated pretty poorly by the country. They couldn't separate the soldier, the person from the politics. When I came home from Iraq at McGuire Air Base in New Jersey, it was about 3 in the morning, and I had just a huge line of Vietnam veterans, as well as Korean veterans and World War II veterans there to welcome us, to say thanks for serving. And it makes me think like they didn't have that when they came home. So that's a very deep appreciation for me to have for them. But that's basically for me for what Veterans Day means to me. And just want to say thank you again to Donald High School for having us all here, and look forward to, you know, coming back next year and having a bunch of other people up here tell us more about, you know, their time in service. Thank you.
And thank you all for your service and sharing your thoughts on Veterans Day. Can we get one more round of applause for all of you?